This is Brandon at Tailwater Fly Shop, and today we're talking tarpon leaders. So today we're going to start by just talking about generally how a tarpon leader is built and why you might use this leader setup. This is kind of an IGFA, almost an IGFA legal tarpon leader that we're going to talk about and the advantages and disadvantages of that as well. So when we're tarpon fishing, there's a few things that we need to be able to do with this leader. One, I need this to turn over in all kinds of conditions, whether it be windy, and we'll talk about kind of some different materials that we might tie this out of to combat the wind here in a second, but I need this leader to turn over on a 12 weight or an 11 weight fly rod with a fly. And you can see, this leader is probably 12 to 15 feet long. I need to be able to turn that whole thing over as straight as possible into fish that are coming at me, so that I can get the best shot possible for myself, my buddies, or my clients, right? I need this leader to have a little bit of stretch, so when the fish takes and turns and runs, he's not going to break my bite tippet or my class tippet. And then I also need it to, if he jumps and lands on it, it's got to have that stretch as well, so that leader doesn't just immediately break when an 80 to 100 pound, maybe if you're lucky, 100 to 150 pound fish lands on this 16 pound monofilament in the ocean. A couple of other things, we use the fluorocarbon bite tippet to avoid the abrasion resistance, because the inside of the tarpon's mouth is going to be like sandpaper. So the longer that this is contacting the fish, he's going to begin to, or she is going to begin to chafe through this. So it's important to have some thickness. Damn, boy, he's thick! In your fluorocarbon bite tippet as well, so that you can stay stuck to that fish in order for you to land it. So starting with the butt section of the leader, I'm using 60 pound mono. And if you're confused about what the butt section is or any other components of this leader, you can check out our previous leader tying video where Alex goes over all the different components of the leader. But I'm gonna use about 6 feet, which is a double arm's length or so for me, of 60 pound monofilament. Then I'm gonna blood knot that to my next tapered section of 40 pound monofilament. And really all you're looking for here is just some kind of thickness into a piece of tapered or tapered down, so that you can transfer the energy from your fly line into your leader system. So I want this to be about the diameter of my fly line, and also you can lay your fly line over and wave it through, and it should kind of wave basically about the same way or the same kind of energy, I guess, from your fly line to your leader. So that's going to give you a good transferred system to take your energy from your fly line all the way out to your fly to turn it over. My 40 pound section is going to be about 4 feet long, so I take that from my spread thumb to about my chest, which gives me about 4 feet a leader, maybe a little bit longer. So from butt section down to where my class tippet is, I'm looking at 10 feet, okay? Then this is a piece of 16 pound Cortland IGFA. I brought just a spool down just to show you, but I use 16 pound for my general tarpon fishing. If you were going to record fish for like an 8 pound or a 12 pound or a 20 pound leader, you'd want to use that, that subsequent tested leader to help you, try to earn that record. But this is a piece of 16 pound here, and as you can see, so in an IGFA legal leader, this piece of monofilament or class tippet is what we call it in the fly leader, has to be at least 15 inches long. So as a good rule of thumb, you want it to be a little bit longer than that. So I go from my thumb again up to about my shoulder, just as a general good rule. And the longer you make this, the more stretch you're gonna give yourself, which basically if a fish lands on this, now you've got a little bit of give to this leader, so when that fish hits the leader, it's not going to blow it up immediately, and you're going to lose less fish if you have this a little bit longer. So it has to be in an IGFA legal leader, it has to be 15 inches long. Good rule of thumb would be to make this 24 to maybe 30 inches, especially if you can cast it, so you give yourself some give. Finally, we're going to come down to our section of bite leader. And so I have, after my improved blood knot from my 40 to my 16, I have what's called a cobra nagel, very similar to a huff nagel, but basically this here section is a bimini twist, and then that's weaved onto my section of bite tippet. We'll talk about that in another video one day. But what this bimini twist does is it gives me, again, just a little bit of stretch in my leader. So when someone strip sets a fish really hard, or if that fish turns really hard and we're not, quite ready for it, it gives you just a little bit of give in this whole system for the fish to not break your leader off. And then going back to the IGFA rules, this piece of bite tippet from knot to the end of your, or from knot to the fly, can only be 12 inches long. So this would be the part where in a normal tarpon trip where I take with a customer, if I'm just going out with a buddy to tarpon fish, I'm not necessarily going to follow, because when I change flies throughout the day, instead of having to change out my whole class system, I can just clip this and change the fly, which just makes our fishing time a little bit longer. So if I were to record fish or I were tournament fishing, this piece from knot to fly can only be 12 inches long. I'm gonna give myself 18 to 20 inches so I can make a few fly changes and still have an effective leader system to catch a fish. Here at Tailwater Outfitters, we don't advocate using a piece of straight 50 as your tarpon leader. And we're gonna talk about a few examples or reasons why you might not wanna do that. So the first reason that you might not wanna use just a piece of straight 50, because when you're throwing this on a 12 weight, if I just tie this 50 or 60 pound leader to my fly line and throw it at a fish, it will turn over and you can catch fish that way. But there's a few reasons why you might not want to. One, it's not very safe. So as that fish, if you do hook a fish with this setup, as that fish is running away from you and you get a fly line wrapped around your finger or your toe or something like that, there's nothing that's gonna break in this leader. So it becomes a safety concern, number one. Number two, when I have a 60-pound piece of leader tied to my fly line, the weakest part of my whole setup then becomes my fly line, which most of your 12-weight fly lines are going to break somewhere around 30 to 40 pounds. So now instead of me just losing a few pieces of mono and a fly, I'm losing my $130, $140 piece of fly line as well. And that might even knock you off the water for the day if you only have one setup. Three, fishing an IGFA leader, one, if you ever get into a tournament setting, or, if you decide to record fish or something like that, fishing a leader with a piece of break strength is required. And also, it just makes you a better angler, because you basically are polishing your angling skills when you're fishing with a piece of line that's going to break at 12 or 16 pounds. And you're going to get away with less mistakes and make yourself a better angler, instead of getting away with more mistakes while you're tarpon fishing. And that's something that we should all strive to do, is make ourselves better anglers. So any given day, I keep 3 different materials of tarpon leaders on my boat. The main one that I'm gonna use is just standard monofilament, all the way through my class tippet to a piece of fluorocarbon bite. The other ones that I will use, and for different reasons I'll show you, I keep hard monofilament leaders on my boat, which will start in the same recipe. I'll use a piece of 60 for the butt section, to a piece of 40, to a piece of 16-pound hard monofilament bite, and then I will put my fluorocarbon bite tippet to that. Hard mono, as you can see, is a little bit thicker, and it's also much stiffer. So when I try to wave this through, you see the regular monofilament is much more supple. So what this is gonna do is this is gonna fish a little better for me on a regular day. If I was out there with like a stiff, 10 to 15 mile an hour sea breeze, or I had someone that was less experienced casting at these fish, or if you use the overweighted fly lines that are very common nowadays, it might be a good idea to go to hard monofilament, because the stiffness of this leader will help you turn it over, so it's easier to cast. So again, for a less experienced caster, if I'm using it in tougher conditions, or if I'm using it on heavier fly lines, the hard monofilament will cast a little bit better. What you're gonna lose in this is the visibility to the fish, obviously, because this is much thicker. And you also lose a little bit of that forgiveness and stretch, because this material being harder, it's not gonna stretch as much. The other material that I will use also is I'll just use an all fluorocarbon leader. The reason why I might use fluorocarbon, a lot of people have a misconception, especially in fly fishing, that fluorocarbon will make the leader invisible. It doesn't necessarily make your leader invisible, but it does reflect less light than monofilament. But the thing that I'm looking for in fluorocarbon that's very, very nice is that it's gonna sink. So if I have fish that are sitting a little lower in the water column, maybe if they're coming out of a deep pocket, or if they've been bugged a bunch down the beach and they're just sitting very low in the water column, I might just use an all fluorocarbon piece of leader. The problem with fluorocarbon as opposed to my normal monofilament leader is fluorocarbon doesn't stretch near as much as mono does. So earlier when we were talking about that forgiveness that you get in this piece of monofilament class tippet, you're not gonna get that near as much in your fluorocarbon, and when that fish shocks this leader, it's gonna break much quicker. So a couple more things to lay out there. Ideas behind just tying a good leader in general is one, that tying knots is going to earn you or lose you fish. So if you tie good knots in your leader, tarpon leader or fly leader in general, you're going to land more fish. So that fish, basically, especially a tarpon, when you hook it and it runs, if you have a bad knot somewhere in your system, it's going to break almost immediately. The other thing is, in our area, in the Tampa Bay area in general, I feel like using a 60-pound bite tippet for fish or tarpon fishing here is kind of the way to go. And having an idea where I might switch down to 40 or switch down to 50 to get more bites, or switch up to 80 or 100 to get, to stay stuck to that fish longer. I don't necessarily think that messing with that all day earns you more fish. I want to fish longer. So I'm just going to stick with 60-pound bite tippet. But in your area, it might be a good idea to use, anywhere from 40 to 100-pound tippet for tarpon, depending on where you're fishing them. So that's a wrap up on my tarpon leader. Like I said, this works really, really well for my area, and I'm very comfortable with this system that I showed you. It can be kind of intimidating, especially if you're new to fly fishing for tarpon, to set this all up on your own. So we do have pre-tied leaders available, and you see that actually the Umpqua leader uses the exact same scenario or system recipe that I use. It's just a 10-foot version instead of 12. And Rio also has very reliable tarpon leaders to use as well. So these are some options for you that you can always use. And then as well, if you like what we have to say, or you ever need any help with these, you can always like and subscribe, comment to our videos, talk to us on our Instagram, or give us a call, or come see us at the shop, and we'll be happy to talk tarpon leaders with you.